can feel the Santa power coursing through my veins. It's like eggnog or something.
Yeah, that's not gonna work, String Bean.
What do you mean? I put on the coat. Fair is fair.
Nope. We added a new clause. Now you have to recap the entire Santa Claus movie timeline to truly become Santa.
Well, it is Christmas, and I'm feeling jolly and maybe a little horny, so whatever, let's do it.
Normally I sleep naked. Naked.
Right from the get-go, the Santa Claus makes it clear that this series is as much about childlike wonder as it is strict adherence to legal precedent and the binding power of contracts. Like, let's have fun, but also let's not get crazy. They demonstrate this by showing the movie title in both strict sans serif font and also whimsical serifs all over the place Christmas font, and then presenting every subsequent credit with both fonts to remind you that this fun kids movie could get shut down if somebody crosses our lawyer, Barry. Anyway, this is all displayed over a raging office Christmas party where some guy named Scott Calvin did a really good job marketing and selling a doll. And his boss speaks into an SM57, which isn't something you can't use for vocals, but it's really more for electric guitars and snares and generally louder and or more, percussive instruments. An SM58 would make way more sense. Scott comes up and says some words and jokingly points out some burgeoning intra-office adultery.
But our families aren't here with us right now. That's probably why Johnson's secretary's sitting in his lap.
And then drives back to his house to meet his dumb kid for Christmas Eve. He calls his ex-wife while on the road and claims that he'll be late because he's stuck in traffic, which is a lie, kind of like Santa. But the bigger issue is he apparently drank too much at the party and nearly misses the exit to his own home. Scott also drives past a kid with some really fucked up ears. Well, I mean, it's an elf, right?
I don't.
Oh, that's...
It was just so funny. They were like, ruining this kid's
No, it's an elf.
Yeah.
So his ears are weird. That's all it is.
I'm kidding.
You thought I was just like shitting on some kid? Like there's some kid with like a gimpy ear. I'm like, yeah, that kid. He eventually shows up and his son Charlie is like, Dad sucks, so I just stay with him. And Scott's ex-wife Laura is like, I mean, yeah, he's your dad. And Charlie's new stepdad Neil sits in the car and says nothing, but just sort of waves in that Judge Reinhold-y way.
Classic Judge Reinhold.
And then Scott asks Laura to come inside, but she's hesitant because they're in a rush, but then agrees. And once inside, all they do is fight for 5 minutes about how Neil told Charlie that Santa wasn't real, an issue Scott wasn't aware of before inviting Laura inside, and then she leaves. So why did he want her to come inside? Why was she willing to come inside? Was he making a play? Scott, you
Dog! I thought I'd stuff some stockings.
We then learn that Scott sucks ass at cooking, so he takes Charlie to Denny's, which clearly paid a lot of money to be featured in the movie.
Everybody likes Denny's.
I mean, they're really targeting this sad single dad demographic, and also maybe the affluent Japanese businessman demographic. This is truly a 2-quadrant film.
It's an American institution.
But so they eat whatever trash Denny forced upon them and go back home. Before bed, Charlie wants clarity on whether Santa is or isn't real, and Scott says, sure, he's real, but realistically believing in something pretty much just means believing, regardless of whether there's any proof or reason to it. And you heard it here first, Santa Claus is Q. And that's good enough for Charlie, so they both go to sleep when Charlie is later aroused by quite a bit of clatter on the roof. Santa is apparently delivering a washing machine or a Bowflex because he is making a shit ton of noise. You'd think after however many millennia he'd know how to be quieter, but whatever. Charlie goes to wake up his dad's hairy legs. Scott immediately runs outside and scares the shit out of Santa, causing him to fall off the roof and literally die, just bleeding out all over the snow like a Belgian citizen in the Battle of the Bulge.
Hey, kids, it's me. I bet you thought that I was dead.
Scott wastes no time looting the corpse, looking for ID in front of his young son, because I guess Scott can just tell on sight that this man is very obviously shuffled off this mortal coil, and there's no point in calling an ambulance. In his pocket, Scott finds a card that says he should totally put on the dead guy's suit. While Scott's reading the card, the corpse slowly waves goodbye, disappears, because isn't that magical?
It's a Festivus miracle!
Then a ladder appears, and Charlie and Scott realize there's friggin' deer on the roof. Before Scott can stop him, Charlie is up the ladder and rubbing his hands all over the wild animals. Scott runs up there too, and one reindeer farts because Christmas. And then they sort of accidentally end up in the sleigh and the deer take off. They drive at street level past a truck, and seriously, this is the least stealthy Santa crew ever. Surely more people would believe he exists if he's this loud and conspicuous. But anyway, they end up on the roof of another house, and Scott is literally
freezing my nubs off out here.
and he wants to go home, in part because he's clearly tripping balls on some powerful acid. But then Charlie pulls some child of divorce 2 Christmases guilt and convinces Scott to put on the suit. It's too big for him because Santa is husky, you see. And Scott mentions how he hopes the house he's about to enter has a tailor, which is funny because he's not husky, you see. And also, he starred as Tim the Toolman Taylor in Home Improvement.
Oh.
So he then picks up the Santa bag, but then, oh shit, the bag becomes a balloon and it sucks him off down the chimney of this random house. On the way, Scott subtly suggests that he used to do drugs in the 60s, which is again funny because Tim Allen in real life is a convicted cocaine dealer.
It's okay, I'm used to it. I lived through the 60s.
While dicking around in the stranger's house, Scott gets shot at and almost eaten by dogs because this is still America. Damn it. He then gets sucked up the chimney and into the sleigh and escapes to exactly one house over. So, okay, spoiler, Charlie believes they enter some sort of
time continuum that breaks down what stands in the sleigh.
where time basically slows down or stops long enough for Santa to deliver all the presents in a single night. But as far as we can see, Santa still experiences time in exactly the same way. So let's do some quick math that also, yes, we did another video, but none of you watched it, so shut up. In 1994, the year that the Santa Claus and Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's were released,
You might have to make a speech in your pajamas.
there were around 5.7 billion people on Earth. Of those, approximately 23% were children, making a worldwide total of about 1.3 billion present-eligible monsters. However, we know that not every kid makes the nice list, and from what little we see in the movie, it suggested that about 2/3 of kids are good, assuming that Veronica wasn't a real tally and just Santa being horny.
Veronica, very nice.
Also, not every kid celebrates Christmas because not every kid is raised in a Christian household or worships the god of materialism. Christianity has hovered around 1/3 of the world's population for the past 100 years or so, and that drops us to 287,430,000. But we need to add in non-religious revelers, which we can estimate by saying 1990s America was 85% Christian, though 96% of Americans claim to still celebrate Christmas. So we can add an additional 13% back in. If we assume that all Christians in the world celebrate Christmas, and we assume another 13% of non-believers will celebrate as well, we're now finally left with 400,660,000. But now, here's where the math gets even crazier. The global average fertility rate is just below 2.5 children per woman, so let's assume that's the number of kids per household, and assume all naughty kids live in clumps of houses and trailer parks. Is that too bad? Which all in all means 160,264,000 households are in need of deliveries. If we assume it takes Santa an average of 5 minutes of travel and delivery time, which feels like an underestimate, but he's probably pretty efficient at this point, his yearly deliveries take 801,320,000 minutes, or 1,525 years. Every year!
He's scary yet educational.
Maybe Scott Calvin didn't murder Santa. Maybe Santa faked his death or killed himself to escape this endless torture. But anyway, back to the kids' movie. Scott delivers a kayak and apparently a live puppy. And are parents not suspicious of these gifts? Would you think it was weird if a stranger left a kayak for your 5-year-old? Would you wonder how a dog ended up wrapped under your tree? No? Then you must be in a Santa movie. Anyway, Scott and Charlie finish delivering presents and may or may not be flying around in broad daylight, but I'm gonna ignore it because suddenly they're plopped down in the North Pole. A wee boy comes out from behind a mound of snow and accesses a keypad thing and types in a code that causes the sleigh to descend into an underground Yuletide lair full of thousands of children. You know, because if it wasn't password protected, who knows how many creepy old men might accidentally stumble onto this underground toy workshop full of unaccompanied minors in the middle of the North Pole. I mean, you can't just motion censor that shit. Anyway, Scott and Charlie quickly run into an oversized Jewish child who sort of seems to be in charge of the place.
Excuse me, are we on a coffee break?
And that's unfortunate because this kid named Bernard is legitimately a complete asshole. He's aware Scott literally just became Santa a few hours ago. And you'd think Bernard would understand if the man had a few questions, especially when Bernard reveals that the card Scott read actually has a ton of literal fine print on it and says, I quote, "And putting on the suit and entering the sleigh, the wearer waives any and all rights to previous identities, real or implied, and fully accepts the duties and responsibilities of Santa Claus in perpetuity until such time that the wearer becomes unable to do so by either accident or design." Confused? Well, Bernard sure isn't, because he literally yells in his new boss's confused face.
It's ridiculous. I never put on suits as a
Try to understand this.
That's how few shits Bernard has left for some reason. The only clue as to why he's such a monumental Christmas dick is that he mentions he's very old. Even then, surely this isn't the first new Santa, right? Like, cut Scott some slack, holy shit. To blow off some steam from all the yelling, Scott almost shows his penis to some toys, definitely shows his penis to a half dozen children, and then flirts with an 8-year-old.
You look pretty good for your age.
Thanks, but I'm seeing someone in wrapping.
Then Scott gets all tuckered out and falls asleep. He wakes up the next day and assumes it was all a dream. Come on. Even though Charlie assures him that it wasn't, and Scott is still wearing the pajamas despite...
Normally I sleep naked.
Thanks, but I'm seeing someone in wrapping.
From there, the movie devolves into a will they, won't they, with Scott trying to decide if he is actually Santa, like Charlie believes, or if he's just a regular convicted drug dealer, like the government believes. It begins with Charlie adamantly telling his class his dad is Santa, which plants a seed in this kid's mind to maybe murder Scott?
When I grow up, if I want to be Santa Claus, all I gotta do is
Push you off a roof.
But it really starts going downhill when Scott gains a shocking 45 pounds in a week. His doctor's like, well, you've probably been eating too many cookies, which is correct. But 45 pounds in a week isn't cookies. That's a tumor. That's a murder attempt. That's like eating 3 elves in one sitting.
And we don't say elves.
Something is horrifically wrong. Also, the movie acts like he's this obese glutton when on the scale he's 192 pounds? What skinny ass nerds wrote this movie? And yet here the doctor is mocking Scott's moobs. Scott's face also magically sprouts copious amounts of unshavable white hair, meaning, naturally, kids everywhere start trying to sit on his lap and tell him what they want for Christmas, including another kid with real fucked up ears. Laura and Neil are horrified and easily persuade a lawyer to revoke Scott's custody of Charlie because, I mean, Jesus, look at him. Laura and Neil also share a little heart-to-heart where they each reveal that they stopped believing in Santa because he didn't give them some cool shit one Christmas. That's kind of a sad and deeply twisted look at materialism, but also, why didn't Santa give Laura a mystery date game or Neil his Oscar Mayer weenie whistle? Back orders? Supply chain down due to a global pandemic? We may never know. So now, suddenly child-free and ready to mingle, Scott sort of accepts his life as a sad, shitty bringer of cheer, which includes apparently not questioning why he's receiving unannounced packages. They turn out to be full of the naughty and nice list, but a big part of this movie is how cool and technologically savvy the elves are. They got keypads on the North Pole and shit, and yet they couldn't think of a digital way to email the list? It's 1994, not ancient Greece. Even if Scott doesn't currently own a computer or email address, they could make him one or something.
Making shit is their whole thing.
Santa then arbitrarily ascribes niceness and naughtiness to some children and women, again, in such a flippant way that I guess I just have to be nice to every old man now? Like Santa makes presumably final decisions on only one interaction, so I better respect my elders and or seduce them with short skirts in case some random creepy dude on the street is secretly Santa?
In your dreams, Playboy.
Scott then, I guess, just decides to defy the court order and head straight to Laura and Neil's house to say goodbye to Charlie. But I put that in quotes because what he actually does is kidnap Charlie with Bernard's help without warning Laura or Neil in any way. All they know is a goddamn lunatic who thinks he's Santa came in and stole their child.
Happy holidays!
So then they go to the North Pole and update the sleigh and shit with some sick-ass 90s tech like a cookie dispenser. And then they hit the open skies to deliver presents and continue to never tell Charlie's parents where the hell he is. Ho-ho, hostage! Of course, the cops are all over Laura's house, so as soon as Scott slides his chubby ass down the chimney, they grab him, call him fat.
Not for you, fat boy.
Fat boy?
Carry him in the weirdest, most awkward way I've ever seen in a movie and take him downtown for questioning and or torture. Probably gonna eggnog board him. Bush would be so proud. Of course, this is the second part of the cops' plan. Their first idea was to arrest every mall Santa they could find, including this black guy who obviously doesn't fit Scott's description. But, why pass up the opportunity, He probably did something. So then the interrogation happens, and the cop makes a big deal of wanting Scott to say his name is Scott and not Santa, but he doesn't notably ask where Charlie is. You know, the kidnapped child. In fact, at this point, this should be an FBI case, right? What are these schmucks even doing? Well, the interrogator gives up because Santa is one nut too tough to crack, and the elves send in their version of a SWAT team to bust him out of jail because you can't spell ACAB without, like, tinsel or some shit. Scott then goes back to the house because I guess the cops stopped watching it for some reason, and he gives Charlie back, and now Laura finally believes, I guess, because Santa gave her son back that he kidnapped. You know, despite this, the mom is actually a pretty great actor, especially for a kid's movie, so that's nice. Anyway, Scott's got to go finish delivering shit to greedy children, and he tells Charlie to stay, but Bernard gives Charlie a dumbass snow globe that's like a pager for Santa. If he shakes it, Santa will come back and give him an N64 or something. Then the big boy SWAT team busts in, but Santa's already gone. Well, not entirely, because he flies over everybody's heads, and they all see him, and A, I can't believe that people still doubt his existence, and B, he's lucky that one of those SWAT guys didn't just pump Comet's asshole full of lead. Charlie then suddenly threatens to murder his dad one day.
I think I'm going to go into the
Family business.
And then, 11 seconds later, after his dad leaves, Charlie shakes that ball because I guess he needs an extra controller, and Scott comes back and abducts him for one last time. But at least this time it's with Laura's approval, or at least kind of, because she tries to impose some rules about not traveling internationally or being too dangerous, and Scott laughs it off because he's Santa, bitch! He does what he wants!
Hey, did you know that 2 out of 3 non-elvish men will experience some form of hair loss by the time they're 35?
That shouldn't affect me too much now that I'm about to be the very immortal and extremely hairy Santa Claus.
Well, unless somebody kills you and steals your power, and then once you go bald, you never go back. No matter how many whiskey-laced eggnogs you put in your stomach or rub on your head.
So you're saying I gotta be preventative in order to keeps my hair?
Exactly, and that's why you should use Keeps. They'll hook you up with a licensed doctor who will review your information online so you can get your hair fixed without going outside or even putting on suspenders or Christmas sweaters. They'll recommend the right hair loss treatment plan for you specifically, and then your treatment is shipped directly to your door every 3 months. Best of all, Keeps offers generic versions of FDA-approved hair loss medications, which keeps things cheap, so you can spend your money on more important things like jingle bells.
And how long do treatments take before they begin showing results?
Between 4 to 6 months. The sooner you start, the sooner your luscious locks will be the envy of every sad mall Santa. So if you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/cracked or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order to keep hopefully 100% of your hair.
You said keeps.com/cracked?
Exactly, keeps.com/cracked. Sign up today and you can become extremely hairy for all of eternity, even if you don't finish watching these horrible movies.
Oh no, I'm gonna finish them, just like I finished Fat Boy over there.
I don't think there's a woman out there that doesn't want a piece of this.
The second movie begins thrillingly with a gas plane flying around in the North Pole looking for gas. Is that a thing that happens? Well, regardless, this is a big problem for Santa and his elves because the plane is able to hear them doing stuff. And you know, what if the plane discovers them? Like, what would happen if they heard jingle bells or whatever?
NORAD invites Santa down to Colorado before the big night.
But really, I'm asking, like, what are they gonna do? Drop a nuke? Melt the ice caps? Way ahead of you, elves! The elves go to ElfCon 1. Haha! Get it? And Santa and Bernard grab this 900-year-old child named Curtis, who is evidently the single loudest dancing Santa doll of all freaking time, just wriggling near his groin area. They silence the toy that can be heard through 25 miles of ice, and the plane flies away with the 3 men on board promising to never tell anybody about this, presumably because it makes for an extremely boring and story. Scott and Bernard refer to Curtis as number 2 and ask if he goes pee-pee with the elf handbook, which to me says this dude is the closest thing we've ever gotten to a sexual character in the series.
Not now.
Beggars can't be choosers. By the way, the budget seems through the roof this time around. The North Pole has gotten a major visual overhaul, including stained glass windows that just spit in the face of Santa's main seasonal competition. You know, Jesus. They probably earned the extra money from the elves working just so hard, just hammering random that clearly doesn't need to be hammered. Also, there's a new reindeer named Chet, who is challenged. For a moment, it appears that Santa might murder all the elves in a football game, but instead he lets the little children win and celebrates with them, which would be sweet if they were actually children. But again, Curtis is 900 years old and Bernard is super old, and my understanding is these are all fully grown and extremely old adults. Why do they tolerate being patronized by this man who to them is the equivalent of a 3-month-old? Also, a pile of adults giggling is kind of sexual again. I'm not falling for your thirst traps, the Santa Claus 2. Smash cut to Scott's son Charlie, who has grown into an incredibly talented graffiti artist, a mediocre criminal, and a lackluster poon hound in equal measures. Also, Charlie is somehow on the naughty list despite not even getting to first base. Whoa! Santa's strict. Oh, and just to raise the thrilling legal stakes of this franchise, it's revealed there's a second, much smaller font, almost certainly non-binding clause Scott unknowingly agreed to that says he needs to get married by Christmas Eve or he'll no longer be Santa.
Not valid in the state of Utah.
This movie is set 8 years after the first one, so why does this clause only come into play now? Why give Santa 8 years to find a wife? And how did nobody notice this before now? Also, can Scott not just retire and pass Santa to somebody else? The movie claims kids are like 83% happier with him as Santa or something, which like, sure, shit on the last Santa's grave, why don't you? But wouldn't retiring be easier than trying to trick some poor woman into sitting on Santa's lap for all eternity? Santa brings some of these concerns up before the Council of Legendary Figures, which includes a canonically PMSing Mother Nature, a mildly homophobic Tooth Fairy, an Easter Bunny who is apparently on the council because of his legendary
I have 33,000 offspring.
and also Cupid, Father Time, and the Sandman. You know, all the legends. The big, like, 7 or whatever. They offer no real advice to Santa, so Curtis steps in and builds a functional cloning machine with
Triple the rim
and creates a literal naked-ass toy version of Scott who can run things at the North Pole, while Scott crashes at his ex-wife's house in the hopes of making Charlie less naughty and himself much naughtier. The clone looks pretty plastic, but apparently he's got most of Scott's memories, which presumably includes all the time Scott went down on Charlie's mom. So, also, he's apparently a stickler for rules, and unfortunately, Hot Cocoa interacts with his body in a very cocaine way. A very pre-famed Tim Allen way. Maybe that's why he beats the shit out of the elves in football. That, or it's because they're adults and should not be coddled. Anyway, Scott's back in the real world, but Bernard warns him that he has a limited amount of magic left in his substantial buttocks, and if he uses too much magic, you know, elongating his penis before a date or whatever, he
Won't be able to return on the pole.
stakes. I believe this scene was the inspiration for Trump saying it's bad to exercise because everybody has finite energy like a battery. Right? Oh, and Scott has a niece now, in case you were worried that Neil and Laura weren't having tons of unprotected sex. Her favorite thing is feeding Chekhov's sweets to Comet. Nobody feels great about Scott's chances to land a wife so soon because it took him 3 whole years to propose to Laura. What a loser! Speaking of, he goes on a date with a woman who's a little out there, but otherwise seems kind of fun and interesting. But then she sings a little too publicly, and he makes her feel bad, so she leaves. Loser. Speaking of losers, complete dweeb Charlie won't stop spray painting pro-Christmas propaganda everywhere, and his sexy principal threatens to suspend him until Scott suggests maybe just give him community service instead.
Welcome to Camp Green Lake.
Unfortunately, said community service is immediately crashed by some dudes in a car blasting anti-Christmas nu metal,
They should be nice, not naughty. Cause Santa knows karate.
who referred to the kids as gangbangers because, well, I mean, I don't know what the kids are into. Anyway, Scott came along to watch his son perform the manual labor, and he and the principal named Carol flirt a little bit. And then Scott kind of flirts with a little girl, promising her he will personally guarantee she has a good Christmas. And this is right in front of her mom. Is she not freaked out by this stranger promising things to her child? I mean, he doesn't even look like Santa anymore. He looks like Tim the Toolman pedophile.
Well, that should hold you till the court martial.
But Scott correctly deduces that creepy interaction made him look awesome in front of Carol. So that night, he shows up to her house unannounced to invite her on a date. How did he get her address? Unclear. Is that creepy? Again, yes, but nobody seems to mind. And Carol invites Scott to come along to the staff Christmas party. Scott takes her there in a minivan that he magics into a carriage so he can hopefully later on one-horse open sleigh some puss. The party starts out lame, but then gets really rockin' when Scott pulls out gifts for everybody because nothing brings more joy than materialism and things. You need things for happiness. In particular, Scott gives Carol a toy that makes her very inclement in her nether regions, and the two share, I don't even know if they actually kiss, but they get real close. They're like, oh, by the way, the Santa clone, he's become full Hitler. He's got shock troopers. He's going to give every kid in the world coal because he's determined they're all naughty. Yay, the North Pole now looks like a concentration camp. I love kids' movies. But whatever, Charlie basically catches his dad with his dick out at Carol's house, which makes him sad. And then Scott makes Carol sad by claiming he's Santa, which she shockingly doesn't believe.
What?
And to think moments earlier, they'd sensually changed each other's sweaters off screen. Curtis flies from the pole to warn Scott we're officially at the Dark Night of the Soul portion of the script, and Chekhov's sweets come back into play because Comet is now fat as shit, and even his ass power won't be enough to get them back to the North Pole. So instead, they try to contact Chekhov's tooth fairy by yoinking one of Scott's teeth so they can hitch a ride. This fails, but thankfully the niece's tooth falls out on its own. They grab the tooth fairy and ride his ass to the pole, but again, are parents not weirded out that their kids get money for their teeth that they themselves are not handing out? I mean, to be fair, the tooth fairy was only going to give her a quarter, but to be even more fair, that was in 2002. It's like $100 in 2021 money. We are post Big Short. Meanwhile, Charlie convinces Carol to f his dad. Good boy. Charlie, you dog. Scott and Curtis get to the North Pole and are immediately caught, but then Charlie Deus Ex Machina is onto the scene thanks to having ripped out one of his own, presumably adult teeth, and then they, plus the elves, make like the French Resistance and just start massacring toy soldiers that may or may not be sentient feeling creatures.
Better, happier.
They do kind of look like Reese Witherspoon.
This has been a long time coming.
Evil Santa tries to escape with coal on a sleigh, but Scott frickin' Flight 93's his ass and causes the sleigh to crash in the middle of town. Christmas is saved. Oh, it's not quite. Scott has to seal the deal before midnight, so he proposes to Carol, even though it's not exactly a fair decision on her part, since the fate of Christmas literally hinges on her willingness to exclusively have sex with a man who will immediately transform into a fat, hairy piece of shit as soon as she agrees to do so.
Eat.
But then she does, and then he does, and then she does too. It's a real Marriage of Sir Gawain scenario, except they both end up ugly.
1 year.
It's all good because Santa tells her they're gonna have a 3-month honeymoon with which to figure out how to line their naughty bits up real nice. Scott says they just can't go anywhere tropical because Santa hates his body too, I guess. It's the most relatable thing about him. Oh, and Nazi Santa is forced to live as a subservient dancing toy for all eternity because Santa is Antifa. Apparently. Man, it's cold in here. It's like Jack Frost nibbling on my toes.
That is not the lyric.
Nicking all my pantyhose.
What?
Knifing a bunch of hoes.
I don't think we're allowed to say that.
Nutting on my bros.
God, no. Are you going to finish the last movie or not?
Fine.
Jack Frost nibbling at your nose.
The third movie immediately flexes its, $50 million smaller budget by showing us a North Pole town / area / gulag that seems larger than ever before. What happened behind the scenes that caused this movie to get such a budget cut? Speaking of budgets that should be cut, we see Mrs. Claus running a school for children that are literally old enough to be Thomas Aquinas' grandfather. But sure, I bet she has a lot to teach them about Jamestown or some shit. And what do you know? One elf immediately says, I don't care about any of this shit. So Mrs. Claus decides to spend the rest of class relaying a fun anecdote about the time she pushed a whole human out of her vagina with approximately 11,000 old children watching. Except, whoops, apparently her story begins with a misfire because she's not actually having a kid yet. It looks like we're about to get a very How I Met Your Mother style story. You know, one that takes a decade to finish. We then see Mrs. Claus and Mr. Claus hanging out in front of a fireplace, sure to permanently traumatize and mentally scar their soon-to-be-born child. Then Curtis bursts in the room and has very clearly aged. That's not what elves are supposed to do. Is Curtis an imposter? And where the hell is Bernard? Curtis mentions that he is now #1. Is Curtis secretly just an awkward 13-year-old pretending to be an ageless elf and actually murdering the real elves? For what purpose, Curtis? What's your endgame, you sick Anyway, for the time being, he just wants Santa to know that they're behind schedule on toy production, and also the Council of Legendary Figures wants to hold an emergency session, presumably to decide if they want to declare war on Christmas, because Father Time is a liberal, probably. Whatever, Mrs. Claus is feeling a little bummed out because she hasn't seen her family in a while, and she claims she's tired of short people, which... To accommodate her need for family and full-size adults, Santa agrees to bring her parents to the North Pole, but they'll need to pretend that it's actually Canada because the in-laws can't know what they're actually doing up here, as if living in Canada would somehow be less embarrassing. At the aforementioned legendary meeting, it's revealed that Jack Frost, who I guess has been on the council this whole time, has been illegally attempting to get his own holiday off the ground. They want to suspend him from the council because of the aforementioned holiday thing, but also he's been screwing with the weather and causing it to snow in the Amazon, which they mentioned as an afterthought, but wouldn't that massacre the local environment and possibly knock over the first domino that could eventually culminate in the extinction of all life on Earth? But no, nobody wants to celebrate Frostmas. Jack Frost doesn't want to be suspended because, I don't know, what does the council even freaking do? Unclear. But Jack suggests maybe instead of being suspended, he can instead become an unpaid intern for the super stressed out Santa, which, as a former unpaid intern myself, I can confirm is a fate much worse than being suspended from the Council of Legendary Figures. Let me tell you. Santa says, sure, unpaid internships still aren't illegal for some reason, so why not exploit some Yuletide labor? Then, inexplicably, Santa leaves the North Pole to hang out with his ex-wife and her family for a bit. They mentioned 300 times that they're behind schedule and the pregnant Mrs. Claus is feeling neglected, but Santa still finds time in his busy schedule to not bring his wife so he can chill out with his ex-wife for a bit. Husband of the year. While there, Santa gives Charlie a snowboard and is guilted into bringing his niece Lucy back with him to the North Pole because she really likes snow globes, which they have at the North Pole and also everywhere else in all of existence. And also Laura and Neil get to come because they're good friends with Mrs. Claus. And also they've never seen the North Pole, even though Scott has been Santa for 12 freaking years. Why have they never been? What a dick. Neil is so excited by his upcoming trip, he just flashes Scott his tits. Oh, okay. Apparently Scott was also picking up Mrs. Claus' parents because that's one of those things that you have to do manually instead of with magic because they need more scenes. He brings along the Sandman to drug his in-laws so they won't know they're not flying to Canada. And Sandman does knock them out, but then he goes to sleep himself because he's sleepy. And while Santa's away, the elves will attempt adultery, as I always say, and Jack Frost unsuccessfully attempts to hook up with Mrs. Claus. Then he switches to Curtis, and the two share a little chat wherein Curtis reveals the existence of an escape clause, because these movies are John Grisham-esque legal thrillers with as much action out in the snow as in the courtroom. Curtis can't reveal too much, though, because of the Elfland Security Act. Because, again, these movies are very silly, as are emergency powers granted to fight terrorism.
Think you can put a good word for me and get me off the naughty list this year?
But Curtis still explains that all the Santas throughout history have had their own personal snow globe, right? I mean, you knew that. What you may not know is that for some inexplicable reason, if a Santa fondles his own globes and specifically wishes he had never become Santa, then he'll travel back in time to the moment he murdered the previous Santa and can now, I guess, choose to not murder him, thereby altering the sacred timeline and probably getting knifed in the back by Loki or some shit. Jack gets frosted tips at the thought of tricking Santa into renouncing his blood-soaked girdle. Behind his eyes, we see a scheme aforeman. Also, here he is contemplating infanticide. But then Santa returns with his unconscious in-laws, and everybody is kind of weirdly excited to see each other, and I don't like it. It makes me uncomfortable. Even weirder and sadder, the series is 12 years old, and all these actors have clearly aged. Christmas movies shouldn't force me to ponder my own mortality, but here we are. How much worse do I look from when I started making these dumb videos? Oh, God. Anyway, Neil does yoga now, which I guess is like being a family counselor, and Jack sabotages the workshop. Jack also attempts to hook up with Santa's mother-in-law and comes dangerously close to sealing the deal and unsheathing his ice pick. This all really stresses out Curtis, who never knows what to do with his gangly arms and huge hands. Then the family goes to see the terrible Elfirmary. Elfirmary, where Mrs. Claus will presumably one day soon crank out that baby. But her dad decides that he needs to be in charge of repairs, and to that end, he starts slapping a hammer against a piece of wood at random. He will fit right in. Then Santa's ass literally catches on fire and some fire elves run in, but they're way less awesome than their name implies. But they do a great job of blasting Santa's hot ass, and this gets him so excited he hauls his gooey blasted ass over to a workstation and creates a new toy that's apparently a rocket scooter and will almost certainly result in the accidental deaths of thousands of children this Christmas. The holidays, they are saved. Then Santa takes Lucy to see the secret snow globes, because why not? Weirdly, there are like 50 snow globes in there, indicating at least 50 Santas. That's actually kind of a lot of turnover, right? Do they ever retire, or are they... I already mentioned how being Santa involves being trapped in a kind of time mind prison, so maybe they're just killing themselves? That's dark. But anyway, Jack sneaks in behind them and steals Santa's personal globe, but Lucy sees this, so Jack basically murders her parents. That's dark too. And despite the fact that it's literally Christmas Eve and truly the busiest day of the year for Santa, Mrs. Claus keeps being all annoyed and disappointed that she's not being paid more attention to. Like, I get that it sucks that he's busy, but after tomorrow he gets a 3-month vacation. You'll be fine. Except no, she won't, because Jack tampers with the Christmas tree and causes it to fall, and so Mrs. Claus essentially tells Santa they are done. So Jack takes Santa on a walk, and Santa's like, yeah, I guess it's over. Pretty insane how quickly these two jump to absolute worst case scenarios like 12-year-olds dating in middle school. They're literally days away from having a child. Everybody calm down. If anybody could use Neil's services right now, it'd be them. But whatever. Santa is ranting about how bad his marriage is and how disappointed he was in the 4th My Chemical Romance album, and Jack somehow manages to trick Santa into holding his globe and saying the magic "I want to quit" words, and then grabs a hold of him as the two travel back in time. They land outside Scott's place just a few minutes before he murdered Santa all those years ago. But before Scott can kill him, Jack screams at Santa, causing him to slip, and then grabs the dead man's coat, thereby becoming the new Santa. Scott returns to the present, where he's reverted to his old ways as a business boy working on Christmas Eve, a la the Family Man. Scott grabs the keys to his objectively pretty sick-ass car and drives to Laura's house to say hey, and I guess find Carol something. But unfortunately, Laura's looking rough, and she's a waitress, and she and Charlie don't give a crap about Scott. Also, Charlie wears cargo pants now, so you know things are bad. Even worse, Neil has taken Lucy to the North Pole, which is now a theme park, and also Neil and Laura are divorced. They did still manage to have sex in exactly the same time and place and position to reproduce the exact same Lucy, but after that, things just went downhill without Scott's careful guidance.
Christmas is going to be canceled.
So Scott hops on a North Pole Airlines flight direct to the North Pole, which is actually a pretty incredible achievement, right? Like, Jack has somehow made the North Pole hospitable for all humans? That's amazing. Good work, Jack. Except, oh no, he's also made it commercial. If last movie Santa was a fascist, Jack Frost's version of Santa is clearly a dirty capitalist. Hell, parents can now buy spots on the nice list for their kids. Wait, so the entire planet knows that Santa is real now? And nobody has invaded the North Pole or anything? Is that good? If Scott fixes everything, could he live a normal, open life as Santa? That never gets addressed, but it doesn't matter because Scott's Santa is apparently a communist Santa, and he decides to seize the hell out of the means of pole production. Before he can, though, he runs into Neil and Lucy, and Neil literally blames Charlie for his divorce, which is sure to strike a positive chord with children of divorce everywhere watching this movie at one of their many Christmases. But anyway, Curtis hands Santa a voice recording pen, which probably won't be useful later, and then settles in to watch an evil cabaret-style performance by Jack. Except, like, people seem into it.
Start spreading the news.
The elves are bored by it, but all the kids seem happy. Is that not the point of all of this? I don't know, but Scott convinces Lucy to sneak away from her dad and steal a snow globe, because even if Scott isn't currently Santa, he's still good at convincing children to do things they almost certainly shouldn't.
Lucy, trust me.
He causes a distraction by smacking a bunch of people in their penis regions until Lucy gets the globe and throws it to Jack, who catches it while Scott plays a recording of Jack saying out of context that he didn't want to be Santa anymore. And look, I don't know much about magic snow globes, but that feels real arbitrary. They should build these things to work on intent. And or maybe just don't make a personalized magic snow globe that can ruin your life forever if you say the wrong thing while holding it. Why did Jack even make a snow globe of his own? If it happens automatically, he should have hucked it in the ocean or something. Nobody should be more wary of that thing than he is.
Destroy it!
Whatever, the dumb plan works and they travel back in time again, and original Scott kills original Santa for a 3rd time, because I guess Jack forgot about his magic frost powers that he could use at any moment to overpower Scott. And also, since this is their 2nd time revisiting the scene, shouldn't the last version of themselves be there now too? I mean, that's how Jack became Santa, which is presumably the moment we're traveling back to. I mean, an accurate version of the scene would include 3 Scotts and 2 Jacks, okay?
You're breaking ranks, Ranger.
Anyway, Scott chastises Jack that Santa isn't something you can take, you have to be chosen, which is categorically false because Jack literally took it for 12 years, and also Scott himself originally just stole a coat from a dead dude. Anyway, Jack dies. Just kidding. They just get blasted back to the present, which is still technically in the past, because remember, this entire story is being relayed to the elves in school. And Scott heals all the familial wounds and decides to show the in-laws his workshop and reveal his
Twisted secret.
They walk in and they're all amazed, but like, they've literally already been in here, right? He didn't say he was Santa yet, but then he does, and I'm like, cool, whatever. They meet a bunch of legendary figures, and also the Easter Bunny also tries to bang Santa's mother-in-law. This is a hot item. Wrap that shit up in a bow. Yum! But there's still the matter of thawing out Lucy's parents, who apparently aren't dead. So Santa again convinces Lucy to do something kind of weird, and she goes and hugs Jack, which causes him to thaw out and become Jack Jalapeno or something because he speaks Spanish there for a minute.
Dos platos de nachos, por favor.
And this new spicy Jack thaws out Neil and Laura with one last bit of body horror.
Maybe we'll just warm things up a little around here.
Then they have a group hug and squeeze so hard that Mrs. Claus is finally able to squirt out her baby. And now, finally, we're back in the classroom, and Santa walks in with a child he calls Buddy, which kind of might imply that it's the kid that Santa stole from the orphanage in Elf. Maybe Mrs. Claus is barren. I don't know. Mary!